This is the Charity Stripe on the Mightier 1090 ESPN Radio.
And now, this is the moment you've all been waiting for. We are live on the Charity Stripe podcast with your hosts, Alex, Josh, and Nick.
We hit on it in our intro. It's HBO just doesn't miss. I really think that's what it comes down to. Like,
except for like the last season of Game of Thrones, but
not their fault. Not their fault. Winning Time, the Laker Dynasty show, has been nothing short of incredible. And we've one of the actors who plays Jamaal Wilkes on the show, Jimel Atkins, joining the boys today. Jimel, how you doing, man? How does it feel to watch it back? Are you enjoying it as much as we are?
Thank you guys for having me, first and foremost. It's exciting, nerve-wracking. You know, you want it to be well received. You want people to understand that we did it out of it's not a smut project. It's not something to deteriorate the Lakers' legacy. So you're hoping for that on the back end when you're watching and hoping that gets communicated. So it's been nothing short of the reception to the show has been really, really, really strong. You know, the consensus has been pretty consistent. So it feels great to be able to enjoy it and kind of let a little bit of that go.
Mm-hmm. But talk to us maybe then about, there's so many interesting dynamics within the quote unquote locker room of the team. Like, you know, a lot of you guys are up and comers in the acting world. Devon plays his dad, which is how many, I don't think many people realize that, but that's Norm Nixon's son playing Norm Nixon, which is crazy. And so what's like maybe some of the side, because you bring up like it gets nerve wracking because it's the Lakers. It's not like it's not the Timberwolves, you know, it's not like we're talking about the Timber. This is Latrell Sprewell story, which is fun. For like, you know, it's like a 3-episode type thing. This is the ultimate basketball dynasty outside my Celtics, even though I'm rocking a Lakers hat. And are you, by the way, you're from Mass, are you a Celtics fan?
No, I actually grew up. It's a funny story. My stepfather was always a notorious, like anything that was Boston, he hated. So I grew up rooting for the Giants and the Yankees, and you know, I was on the other side of the spectrum.
Oh, nice. Well, I'm glad you kept the Knicks out of there because they stink on ice.
I can't defend them.
So maybe what's like the locker room like, you know, before the show is released and while it's going on, because Magic and Kareem, these are not just basketball players. These are superstars, legends in the world.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because, you know, just like coming from a sports background, is I'm one of you guys played at UT, right? Was
Nick?
That was
Nick, me, yep.
Yeah. You know, when you have these, and I'm sure everybody else here has played sports at all different levels, but it's when you see the crossover from when you're around those guys all the time, because we have so many scenes together as this progresses, where it becomes more and more and more without giving anything away about the team, and the dynamics that mimic real life always end up mimicking that too, even though it's a show and it's curated in terms of, you know, you're watching people's personalities, you're watching them switch into characters, you're watching how they handle different things, you naturally gravitate to one, you naturally gravitate away from another one, you know, but all of that ends up being a true camaraderie. And you know, working with all those guys, Devon, Solomon, Quincy, Delonte, who plays Michael Cooper, you just start to be like, wow, all this blood, sweat, and tears does actually formulate a bond that you can really like get behind and feel comfortable when you're in that space.
Yeah, for sure.
What was it like, you know, for you guys? You're just talking about the team, you know, Quincy and Solomon, this is their first big acting job.
Yeah.
Right. And you have David Makes Man, a show that was on OWN, which was awesome. So you had some of that experience. And of course, Devon has a lot of experience. What was that like, being with all those different guys with varying experiences? And just, was there a lot of learning? Was there a lot of you teaching some? Like, what did that look like?
I wouldn't say, you know, when you're on such a prestigious network and you have the best of the best around you at all times, you know, it's, you know, if somebody did ask me something, I offered what I accumulated. You know, I started this journey in 2016, and you know, the actor's journey is not always one that you seem to put in a lot more time into it than you get to reap the benefits of, at least at the beginning. So, you know, when I was asked if there was something I could offer, I could for sure. But when you have Max Borenstein, when you have Adam McKay, when you have these directors, when you have Jason Clarke, when you have John C. Reilly. Sometimes with acting, you learn just by literally sitting down, paying attention and focusing to others. And it starts to really rub off. So, you try to offer whatever you can, but it's also, luckily on this show, you had so many heavy hitters that, you kind of just enjoy and learn from them as well.
Yeah, and there's so many parallels, I feel like, in the sports world as well, because you look at a training camp like in the NFL or even the NBA, and all of the rookies got to take notes from the vets, right? And they've got to lend a hand there to teach them the lessons. And I mean, it's funny that this is a Lakers show and it's pretty much the same kind of parallels there when you're talking about these legends. But I'm just curious. I mean, there's a lot of athletes that have turned actors that we've come across, some on our show, some just in the world of living in LA. Yeah. And how do you think that's prepared you to be an actor, being an athlete first?
What's funny is it got to the point where when I started the acting journey, I was my story with football at USF was a little bit tumultuous. It was I went to a JUCO beforehand. I went to a Division I AA before. Then I ended up at a Division I program, and you grind through, and you're hoping for a scholarship. I was a preferred walk-on at the time, which I didn't know meant you're not going to get a scholarship. You find that out after you go through, a couple semesters. But the one thing that I will take away is it took me a long time to understand the parallels. But what I didn't understand about sports at the time, barring injuries, of course, was that the work ethic that's required to become the best in the field is extremely similar in acting. It's just more mental, and it's more mental reps of, I have to read this book. I have to work on emotions, vulnerabilities. I have to work on being in touch with myself. I have to work on connecting with myself in a different way. And if you can see, and as you know, there's guys that don't get drafted that end up becoming sensational. It's like, it's just the amount of the list of people that we could go through right now that were walk-ons that are in, the NFL or G League players that are now dominant in the NBA or have roles that are substantial is like really, really noticeable. But the thing that you notice about that is you don't get there unless you're consistent and being able to understand. So it's just in breaking that down into little steps, right? When I played football, it was, I have to get faster. I have to get stronger. And, you show up every day and you put that work in, and then you start to see the results 3-4 months later. The acting side of it, I think, is obviously you have to have a natural natural artistic inclination to that.
Right.
But I think it's so similar in the way that you can literally it's a skill, and you can literally, if you continue to do the work, it's just, especially in just American culture, that new mental side of things is not really discussed as much, but you find that out in the acting, it's like, oh shit, I'm sorry. Like, you're like, oh, I have to sit down with myself. I have to really, I have to really work through this day in and day out. So it's very similar to that.
You could curse, by the way. Don't. Great answer, but you can let you Curse. This is HBO After Dark. The old
I fucking love it. Perfect.
The old Skinamax podcast.
Yeah, Josh isn't rocking no undershirt.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to go Dr. Bus here. I was trying to fit the theme. It's a great point about the muscle memory. It's like it is a muscle that you bring up, because I did a lot of improv when I came out to Los Angeles, and being funny off the cuff, which is what you perceive it as,
right,
is just it's not enough.
Yeah.
They sat me down, they told me that.
Right.
Being cool and, and just kind of little jabs, you're not going to get anywhere with that. You'll get somewhere, you'll not get where you want to be. And you actually have to learn the skill and learn the muscle. And then having that knowledge opens it up. Like, look, we were talking about it before we got on air. There's a height requirement to be in the show. Like, Quincy can't be 5'6" and rolling out as 6'9", right. Irvin Johns. He doesn't have to be 6'9", but he's got to have some height to him. So there's stuff that'll get you in the door. Right. But your guys are not the only 6'4" guys auditioning for this part.
Exactly.
So you have to, stuff will help you get there, but there is that level of, professionalism, but also understanding. I love how you bring up being in touch with your emotions and being constantly checking in with yourself, because people think acting or performance is very just charismatic driven, which it helps, but
and to your point, it also depends on what your goals are. You have guys that look up to LeBron James and want to gravitate as much. Obviously he's an he's the exception, and he's my favorite player of all time. So I'm going to be biased, but there's nobody there's very few people that are going to be able to get to the LeBron James level of success of basketball. And then some people settle for less, just like there's not that many people. And hopefully I'll be able to sit on the other side of this. But, but when you guys had Matthew McConaughey on, or, when you think about Leonardo DiCaprio, it's like these guys are the top of the top of the top of the top. Mm-hmm. And in order to get to that level, the amount of work is the same that athletes have to do that are trying to get to the level of a Michael or a LeBron, so, and I think that also just another parallel that comes to mind is that there's an honesty that I love about sports, as you guys know, when you're in the team and you got your coach and he's cussing you out, and you sometimes you need, like, it's interesting, you have to be sensitive to things, of course, but I think that honesty that it takes when you have a team environment and when somebody tells you that you stink, is very, very helpful.
100%.
So it's like, you get my point.
I feel like with acting, sometimes you don't get enough of that criticism sometimes, like in an audition process, where if you feel like you smoked an audition, you didn't get it, the casting directors aren't going to give you notes unless, you're like up for consideration, or if like, you're one of the top people.
Right.
You could submit a tape and, never hear anything. Yes. So on the flip side, in sports, if you mess up in a play, your coach is gonna dog you, right? Or your teammates are gonna say something to you. I feel like with acting, like, you gotta have to hold yourself accountable. You got to figure out your own flaws and try to correct them. And of course, there are communities that you can join, acting classes. You can work with other actors, but I feel like it's kind of a lonely place sometimes.
Yeah, it is. My journey with that is I kind of separated. I was very, I spent some time in Tampa when I started, and I went to a small school out there. She's no longer doing it. Kathleen Laughlin was her name. And then I came out to LA, and I didn't know who to study with. And I didn't want to sit through the bullshit of, there's a million acting studios. And I didn't want, with all due respect to all trainers, I didn't want to get coached by somebody that doesn't end up coaching people that ended up really doing impactful work. Mm-hmm. Just like you wouldn't go to a trainer, that whether it's sports or not, that doesn't produce any athletes that end up making it. It just doesn't make any sense. So, it's like that, you want to find people and build a craft or build a system in place where you can find constructive criticism. And, you get that. Sports is a little bit more harsh, but if you come from that background, I'll be the type. At the beginning, I've been out here since 2019 after David Makes Man. It was my first opportunity. And I think I've done over 250 auditions since then. And, sometimes I'm competing with other great actors, Winston Duke and Michael B. Jordan. And you don't know that on this side, and they're not going to tell you. So you can only control so much, right? So it's like, sometimes you just got to sit down with yourself and be like, okay, the only way I'm going to make it, just very similar in sports, is I have to find ways to continue to get better and better and better. And that's just through that long process.
Well, you talked about the audition process, how many auditions you've had since getting out to LA. And I think that, that's the perspective of a lot of actors who are consistently auditioning, is people are like, oh, you were on this and this and this. And what the general public doesn't understand is there was 500, 1,000 auditions in between that. Right.
Yeah.
What was it? What was your feeling when you auditioned for Winning Time? What was that, a little inside baseball here? Were you feeling really good about it? Yeah. Were you feeling bad about it? Like, how did that happen?
It's a great story, so I hope they don't get mad at me for sharing it. But so I originally, and this is kind of so similar to, and it's great if anybody else that's an actor hears this, of course. But so I auditioned for Winning Time in 2019, and I had originally auditioned for Magic. And what was interesting was, as an actor, sometimes you get roles, and you're like, I'm not going to fucking book Magic. I don't look nothing like him. I'm not the same skin color. I don't, it's just not going to work. Right. But you do it anyways, and then that audition birthed the Jamaal Wilkes audition. And of course, now, as an actor, you really have to try not to be bitter about things. Right. So I re-auditioned. I went in there begrudgingly a little bit, but I said, I'm just going to try to focus and match his mannerisms, his voice, his softness, his ability to be able to be confident without coming off as weak. And then I guess a week later, my manager calls me back and he says, hey, Adam McKay looked at 150 Jamaal Wilkes and he said that you're the guy. So that was the first step. then obviously, so then, this
And
is
then your mind flips. You're like, yeah, I think I'll give home ec another shot. Like,
yeah. Right.
With Jules.
And so anyways, the story continues. We're training. The first time around, I had 6 weeks before we prepared. And, my whole thing is I want to come in and shock people. I want to be completely dedicated. I lost 20 pounds in 6 weeks. And then, of course, because of the situation, my scene ended up getting cut from the pilot. So I had to wait until it got announced that it was getting picked up to then find out if I was keeping it. So I'm keeping in shape. I'm playing basketball. I'm trying to keep my weight down. January 2nd of 2020, I tear my entire Achilles playing basketball. Right. It's crazy. And as you guys know, it's one of the most devastating injuries in sports that you can have. So the COVID and the pandemic gave me just enough time to get to the point where I could run and walk again. Fast forward to March of 2021, my manager calls me. They say, "Hey, they still love you for the role." And we're gonna discuss the contract or what your role will be next week. I now pick up the phone, joyful, right? And I'm like, all right, and I'm like, show me the money. What's going on? And he says, yeah, they want to look at somebody else to play Jamaal Wilkes. So I'm, crushed. I'm, devastated. And this is all in the span of like, I don't know if I got the role. I had the role, worked out, got in shape, did all this, tore my Achilles, come back. Did
they know about that?
No, I kept it a secret on purpose. And they know now, obviously, because it was very difficult to do all the stuff after they found out. But yeah, it ended up being a thing where it was joyful, it was tumultuous, and then I had a come to Jesus thing with myself where I was just like, I said no to my manager. I said, no, fuck that. Tell them I want to re-audition for the role. And so this time I went ahead, I did a full prosthetic beard at home, and I really tried to nail in the man. I felt like I already had a head start, right? Because I had already studied the guy for a year. Yeah. And then that ended up turning into a series regular, very, very exciting. I tried to make sure I showed up every day, and, I'm excited for what's to come of the role, but nobody knows, like, even in that, like, that situation is nuts, Right. So that's just how the chips fall.
That is absolutely ridiculous. One of the questions we were going to ask you is if how much you studied Jamaal Wilkes, of course, and like, did you watch old game tape? But I'm sure you did at this point. I mean, you
had a prosthetic beard.
Yeah.
Yeah. The hardest thing was, as you guys know, football mechanics are very different than basketball mechanics.
Yeah.
So, about the football player that's trying to play basketball.
I'm trash at basketball.
It's tough. It's really tough. I mean, it's taken me a year just to be able to say that I have a decent, game. I can hold my own, and not be injured anymore. Right. So I spent a lot of time focusing on his mannerisms and physicalities and how he holds himself and how he diverts eye contact and things of that nature. What makes him tick? What's he trying to hide? All these different things. Because we also had a great guy in the name of Adon Robin, who's trained everybody in the NBA coming up, from Steph Curry to LeBron to Carmelo. And he was able to really help me understand that there's a smoothness to his game that you can't replicate unless you're constantly doing reps. So you can watch all the footage that you want, but then it comes down to the point where even still, whatever happens next, it's going to be the same thing of just making sure you hit that foot when you go up for a layup, that it's the correct foot, it's a correct extension, it's the correct motion, and just repeating that 500 times, until you start to land it.
Let me say this for those listening. Wilkes is not just like some guy in the league. He's a four-time champ. He's an all-star. He was like Bill Walton's number 2 at UCLA, ran the gauntlet. This is a California basketball. He might be on the California basketball 15, like the roster, or close. Like he is like a Cali basketball legend. And like, it's funny, like we're going to ask you, like, you probably know what the guy's laundry smells like. You've met him?
No, we haven't. I haven't. The only one I've met Norm. I've met, obviously because of Devon. I haven't made any connections with him. I would love to sit down with him because I have so many more questions, but even to your point, it's one of those guys that's like a legend that kind of kind of skated through the radar, because you have somebody like Magic and you have somebody like Kareem, and then you have this whole dynasty that's being built while you're in the midst of it. Like, you're one of the key pieces. So I can't, sometimes I think about it, I'm like, how did he manage his own ego being literally a legendary basketball player, not getting sometimes the respect of it?
Well, they had like the whole scene. One of the to that point, like one of the whole scenes is they have with Jason Clark. You brought him up, is so good.
It's nuts.
It is nuts how, dude, he's awesome. I mean, I don't know. Like we only know old Jerry West. Like, this is such like a good insight on like young Jerry West and Pat. I mean, Adrian Brody also, like the fact that he's in the mix is bonkers. Shout out to him, because everything he touches is gold.
For sure.
The scene with Jason Clark when they are breaking it down and he goes, "Get me what I need." And you're looking at it and going, you have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and you have Magic Johnson. What else do you need? And then you kind of equate it to what we have going on now with the Lakers, when before the season, you have Anthony Davis, you have Russell Westbrook, you have LeBron James. What else do you need?
Yeah.
You need.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, it's amazing how you can have all these dynamic individuals, but if they don't fit, they don't fit. Mm-hmm. And, imagine, it's something I was thinking about the other day. Imagine if Jamaal Wilkes had the personality of an athlete that wanted more shine. What if 18 points a game for your career isn't enough? How did it, I think about that. Like, how did it feel to, score 37 in the first time that they win the championship is the first time together, in the year that we're playing, and get skated over, as if 37 points is easy for anybody, so it's like, it's crazy, to your point, how much he had to really manage his ego, or else these pieces don't gel, and then you don't have the Showtime Lakers, even for the people that get glossed over.
Like, this guy, if you can get 18 or 19, you can get 20 something.
Easy.
So easy. Like, there's not that much. Once you pass that 18 points per game threshold, the step up to getting 20, not like 30, you're not going to go for 30, but the step to get to 22, 23, he did it. He's averaged 20 plus a game.
Yeah.
So that's like, it's putting your egos aside a lot of the time. We've seen it time and time again. That's, that's been an issue that people have had. And I mean, I guess like you kind of alluded to it, not to put words in your mouth, but like you auditioned for Magic. And I'm assuming that there's quite the opposite of beef between you and Quincy, who like now has the role.
Oh yeah. No, it's not even, when I saw Quincy perform the role too, I was just like, yeah, that fits. One of my biggest things is I try to really be, and it's a credit to the guys that you even have come on the show, is I really try to be a person that like tries to view things in a what makes the most sense,
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to be like, oh, it's like, there's room. And that's the thing too. It's like, in sports, you learn without people telling you that up until a certain point, you really do have to focus on you. In order to make it to the next level, you do end up having to turn that around and understanding that you have to separate yourself. So what's dangerous sometimes is in this craft, you have to do some of that, but you have to do that work when you're not around people, so that way your confidence and your abilities are all, set, if you will. You can't show up and carry that over. So when I saw Quincy in the role, I'm like, this is dope. Thank God they found somebody that looks like him, even me, I'm like,
he looks just like him. It's crazy.
Yeah. I feel like I look like Jamaal, especially as the season progresses and you get time to really get your physical mold into the character, so for me as the acting purist, if I may, is like, I'm like, no, you guys got to find the right guy. So thank God, I'd be like, no, I don't want that pressure of having to pretend, you want that natural gelling, if you will.
Sorry, Nick.
No, it's all good. Did they bring you on board as well to do your own beard in the show, since you
no. What's funny is I was shocked, because I thought that year they were going to let me keep the beard, and without my beard I have much more of a baby face. But there was one episode, episode 4, that they just did that in the throwback footage. I had the beard, so they did it. But I'm clean shaven the whole dang way.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, we do have a couple more for you though. They're in the same vein. The first one, we were interested to know, do you have a favorite story, favorite memory from the set?
Oh yeah, actually, It was the very first day that we put on the uniforms, and we had to. It was the same in episode 4. We had to go shoot the throwback footage of the year before, and we put on the uniforms, and nobody had seen anybody in any of the Lakers uniforms at all whatsoever. So it's all of us. You know, it's Solomon dressed up as Kareem. It's Devon as, you know, his father. You know, we got the short shorts on. And one of the things that stood out to me was when we walked in, everybody started cheering, like all the cast and crew.
Okay.
And it was like, then it's like there was a moment there. I'm like, oh yeah, this is way bigger than it's not just a TV show. This means a lot to people on an emotional, like, connective level in terms of what the Lakers mean. So then you start to realize, oh, I have to take this very seriously. Yeah.
That's wild. I mean, this kind of gives me like Remember the Titans vibes. I don't know why, because I guess like Remember Titans like had Denzel. Like, y'all have John C. Riley, but then all these other guys just are coming like Gosling's and Remember the Titans. I feel like people don't really like. He's just like, and he's like not even like the main guy. He's just like linebacker that gets moved over from, you know, the guy from Scrubs, who I'm his name forgetting. If you don't mind sharing, because I don't want to take away from like a potential personal relationship, but I'm just a little curious. Maybe like one question you feel like you'd want to ask Jamaal, if you could kind of give us some insights there, if you have one.
Yeah. I think the one thing, I mean, I alluded to it a little bit earlier, but I would like to know the things that he wasn't good at managing, you know, and what did that look like? Because I can only assume from the outside. So it's like, you know, he grew up in a very, very stable, from what it seems, from what I've read. I read his biography, the one that he published. And it seems like everything was very stable. And he talked about a few instances that made him steer away. There was a gun pulled on him when he was in a car with one of his friends, that, you know, little situations like that. But I would love to know, what were the things that you struggled with that you don't want to necessarily mention, that and what was like dealing with it? Because as somebody that's so private, I always wonder, what's the outlet? Like, where was the chink, you know what I mean, in the armor? And where was that part of your humanity? Because I always feel like that tells a lot about a person too.
For sure. I mean, you learn a lot about yourself through adversity.
Yeah. So it's like, what was the dark side of you? What does that look like? You know,
on an adversity level. I mean, you brought up our interview with McConaughey, and one of my favorite parts about that one is we talked about his, and people don't know this about McConaughey until they read his book,